Hello and welcome to Monday night with Brian and John. This is a new initiative of the Australian Taxpayers Alliance, the ATA. We're going to do a politics chat, a live stream each Monday evening, at least in the lead up to the federal election. And if it's going well, then maybe beyond. But I won't sign up Brian to more commitments than I've already asked him to live on air, because that would be very rude. So this is going out live, so you'll see all our mistakes in real time. It's going to YouTube, Facebook, and X. So if you're on those platforms, please give us a like, please give it a share. Please write in your comments. If you write in your comments, we will be able to see it here, put it up on the screen and engage with you, answer your questions, mock you if it's a stupid comment, or agree with you if it's wise. So please do like, share, comment, grab a drink, and we will have a chat. Now, it's probably more important to do this at the end when there's more people watching, but just for anyone watching the pre-recorded later, we are putting this on behalf of the ATA, Australian Taxpayers Alliance. There's the website down there. Please get along there, sign up to membership. We've got a bunch of different options for you if you want us to be able to keep doing what we're doing, some of which we'll discuss tonight. That membership would help. Now, there's fancy, expensive options, and if you've got more money than I do, feel free to give it all to us. But if you're a normal punter, there's a cheap-ass option there as well, which would be very much appreciated. It helps to keep things ticking over. So it's a couple of bucks a month, I think, to help us keep doing what we're doing. But I'll stop the pitch now, go back to being a normal human. And Brian, how you doing?
Good, mate. Good. I just wanted to call the bloody election already. I'm bored. I'm done with it. I don't care.
All right, who won?
Have this out.
Actually, well, I mean, I didn't mention it. Most of what I'm going to ask you on this, but who do you think's going to win? I was chatting with a few other political friends earlier today, and there was a range of opinions. Where do you put it?
I mean, I've been saying for 2.5 years now that Peter Dutton will probably be the next Prime Minister. The question is, to what level is the win? And albeit while I've been saying that for a while, I have noticed, you talk to friends around the traps, friends in politics, it's all pretty incestuous. Some people now feel like a coalition win is a surefire thing, and they just seem to be taking their foot off the pedal a little bit. The talking point I had for a while, up until about August of last year, is that if Trump gets elected, there'll be a vibe shift across the West, and that will help a lot of conservatives get up all around the world. And to some extent, that seems to be happening, but it's kind of a poison chalice, right? Like, the coalition, up until about August of last year, seemed to be wanting to push on some certain issues. Peter Dutton was talking about, trying to actually control unfettered migration and a whole bunch of other issues. And then the vibe shift happened. And now, most recently, people seem to have just been sitting back a bit. It almost feels like they think that they're just going to walk it in, which means they don't have to commit to anything and not really have any, strong stances other than, maybe a Doge in Australia or some other things like that. But yeah, it's a long way of me saying I think that Peter Dutton will be the next Prime Minister, but I'm sensing that some of them are starting to take their foot off the pedal a bit, and people can't get complacent.
I end up with roughly the same conclusion as you now. I very weakly believe that Dutton will scrape over the line to become the next Prime Minister. And I think he's clearly running away from doing too much and trying to hide most issues. We can talk about that Medicare, that ridiculous face-off where they're both trying to outspend each other in a moment.
On an issue that no one about, but yeah.
Although my interpretation is a bit different. I mean, this vibe shift, the Trump election's part of it, but I think the vibe shift's been on for several years now, happening everywhere in the world, everywhere in the Western world except Australia. So you can go through the list. I mean, Argentina elected Milei. America just elected Trump. In Canada, they're about to elect someone who's actually interesting. I can't pronounce his surname because it's French, but it's the Povlier or whatever you say. But in France now, their normal right-wing party has been replaced by Marine Le Pen. Their old version of the Liberals was called the Republicans. So their version of the Liberals has gone from a 40% party to a 3% party. And it's totally flipped. Their version of One Nation.
Vibe shift that got Trump in, right?
And then we got Brexit. Nigel Farage is currently leading in the polls in the UK. You've got Germany, where AfD just got 20% and came in second. You've got Romania, where a populist independent just came first, and the High Court of Romania cancelled the election because they didn't like the outcome. You've got Austria, where their version of One Nation just came in. first. You've got the Netherlands, where Geert Wilders and the PVV came in.
Yeah.
I mean, like Italy is run by a populist that's not from the mainstream right. This is happening everywhere in the world, everywhere you look, except one country that I know, maybe a bit New Zealand as well. But
Yeah, but we've always lagged behind
much.
on this stuff, right? And I've never been able to pinpoint why. I'm always able to observe the problem and then never actually figure out what the fucking cause is. But Australia has always lagged behind on this stuff. So what will happen is, like, we'll get a vibe shift in the 2028 election. Like, it'll just, and it doesn't really make much sense. So I feel like, yeah, Dutton will most likely be the next prime minister. I put up a post on the Citizen Go Twitter, actually, when I was ranting about that, which was effectively talking about the hate speech legislation and how that's basically about containment of a resurgent right in Australia. But more importantly, one of the things I put in there is that a lot of right-wingers will probably still vote for the coalition, at least in the lower house. And I think the coalition are making the mistake of thinking that that's an endorsement of them as opposed to a rejection of Albo. And, you know, you see that when it comes to Senate votes as well. So, yeah, it's a long way of me saying I think that he will become Prime Minister. I agree with you that this vibe shift seems to be happening everywhere else but Australia. But there's fumes of it here, and I think it'll pick up after the election and hopefully ramp up by 2028.
Well, inshallah, brother, inshallah. By the way, I think I have part of the answer for why it's slow to happen here. And it's not a very easily fixable problem, but compulsory voting. Compulsory voting just reinforces the major parties always tacking to the low information voter, because low information voters voting on vibe at the last minute can easily flip an election. So they don't have to tap into the activist base. They can take them for granted, and they nearly always do. And they pride themselves on taking, both Liberal and Labor, pride themselves on taking their base for granted and saying, oh, look how much I don't care about my base. I'm such a reasonable centrist moderate that can get in touch with the common man.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I think it slows down all of the good trends. Sorry?
I was saying, do we get in trouble with YouTube for swearing? I'm not really sure. But yeah, no, I agree. There's like compulsory voting seems to enable parties to the major parties to just go, look, we are giant cucks, and this is why you should support us. And we don't care about what our actual base supports. So, you know, back us instead. So yeah, I think you're right. Maybe that is why there is a huge lag in Australia when it comes to vibe shifts. I still think it's
Roy also. Yeah, well, touch wood. But Roy makes a point here that as of yet, it's not very easy to spot what that alternative party is. Haven't got a clear alternative to the Uni Party. The bureaucrats run the country. That's true in all Western democracies, probably true in all non-Western countries as well. Unfortunately, we live in the age of bureaucratic control of the government, which thankfully people are starting to see, because the old problem was no one could fix it because no one saw that it was a problem. Thankfully, we're starting to see it's a problem, and they're starting to fix it in America. You know, God bless Elon Musk. I don't think the Australian Liberal Party has caught up to that mindset yet, which is one of the most frustrating blind spots they have.
Yeah, and I mean, to Roy's point, yeah, I agree that there doesn't seem to be a clear alternative. You know, maybe we can have a trumpet of the Libertarian Nation Party, but who fucking knows? And it's quite funny. Like you talk to people in right wing circles, and it's like the same 50 people that you talk to, and then all 50 of them all want to set up their own political party. Like they're just like, oh, we need a new right wing party. It's like, oh, okay. And what's yours going to be? It's like, oh, it's going to be really right wing this time. Fuck, okay. Right.
There's that meme where it says, you know, like there's 5 different versions of something. Well, we should just create one united one. So I'll create a new one that'll unite them, and then you end up now you have 6 different versions of something.
Yeah. And everyone's standing there being like, we need to unite these parties. Fuck, what we need is a 7th one.
So I'll build one to unite them, and then no. So speaking of which, let's use that as the first deviation onto my very short talking point list. The minor parties in Australia, you would have seen online on X, there's all this constant discussion about what do we do. There's One Nation, there's Libertarians, there used to be UAP, but they're not registered, so now we have trumpets. But then we also have Family First. You've got potentially the Shooters, although they may not run. You've got the WA Christians, you've got the Queensland Katter Party, and a bunch of other smaller ones. So we've got People First. How could I forget that? Gerard Rennick's People First Party as well. So we've got this scattering, the splintering. And then, of course, we'd already looked like a splinter between One Nation, Libertarian, and Rennick. And then Clive shows up and puts the trumpets on the map. Presumably, we haven't seen any polling, but presumably his money will help. And it seems like most of the people following along are very frustrated and they want a coming together. But it's not clear to me how that ever is supposed to happen. I know people are very good at throwing stones and saying other people should do something that I will never do.
Yeah,
but it's
look, I don't want to be that guy that's just blackpilling. I think that yes, there should be a coalition of these parties, and I hate to just completely incriminate myself based on what I just said, which is all there needs to be a push to have a proper minor right party, and I support what JR is trying to do there. I don't think it'll happen in time. To be honest, some of the parties that would have to be encapsulated in order to get this done don't even have fucking members, really. Like, if we're being
well, I think
honest,
we're skipping ahead because you're talking about John Ruddock, Libertarian MP from the New South Wales Parliament.
Yeah, well, I saw something on X today about sort of about this like giga party kind of idea, and I just don't. I think it's a great idea, but I'm not. I can't see it happening before the upcoming election, and the reason for that is, in my view, and people are going to probably attack me for this. Love Ralph Babbitt, great guy. Really like Ralph, but in my view, Clive is just this like weird fucking whirlwind that just appears to be creating this weird containment party called Trumpet of Patriots. And
Trumpet of the Patriots? Yeah, something like that. I just call it Trumpet. The Trumpet Party.
It will only serve to fracture the minor right vote, particularly in the Senate, which is where it actually matters. And I just don't. I don't see a sort of giga party getting formed in time to actually, get all these different coalesced groups together as one sort of, block.
Yeah. Well, let me, for the sake of people following along at home, if you've been following this debate about all these minor parties and what to do, in Ruddock's post, he went through a few of the options and it's worth unpacking them. So one that everyone always repeats is they should merge. So firstly, it's just technically impossible before this election. So it's just a moot point. The other ones can humanly be done, may not be done, but can. That one just can't be done. So we don't have to worry about that. But the other thing is these parties, some of them have a lot of history and a lot of things that they disagree about that they couldn't get over. So merging is going to be a difficult solution. Another one people say is just preference each other well. I mean, of course they should do that. If nothing else, they should try to preference each other. The problem is minor party, especially minor right voters, don't normally follow preference recommendations and the preferences do scatter. 2022, a lot of work was put in. Topher did his first Marble video. There was tight preference swaps and a lot of media done about the preference swaps amongst the minor parties, and still the preferences scattered. And then you got this third option of the parties come together and they just agree which states to run in, which ones not to run in. I mean, that's so far that keeps running into to hurdles. I mean, you can imagine everyone agrees that they should be the lead candidate. So it's a little bit hard to work that out. So this fourth option, which may not be doable, but in my opinion is probably the least undoable, if you'll excuse the double negative, the only one that may be doable. And maybe none of them are, but the only one that may be doable is this idea of, instead of the parties just trading off between them about where to run and where not to run, you form a coalition, much like the Liberal National Coalition. So they're still separate parties. Liberal and National are still separate parties, and Libertarians and One Nation could be separate parties, but they can run on a joint ticket. How do you decide who's at the top of that joint ticket? You have an open primary. You let the members of the parties choose, which I think it's very consistent with John Ruddock wrote a book many years ago, Make the Liberal Party Great Again, where his pitch was to fix the Liberal Party, let the members choose. And this is a similar pitch. And it doesn't have to be just two parties. You could invite 5, 6, 7. There's currently 10 registered minor right parties. And they could all put up a candidate. You could have a big convention. Everyone hears the candidate speak. Every member of all the different parties gets a vote. And that's like a very honest system. And I suspect during the course of the debates, people won't necessarily just vote their ticket. They'll show up preferring their party, but if they see a better candidate, I imagine there would be a lot of back and forth and debate and discussion. And then whichever candidate win, everyone else agrees to just have that one ticket. So instead of having like 5 different parties on the ballot, you would just have the one column. And that one column would mention One Nation, Libertarians, Trumpets, or whichever 3 got the first 3 places in the vote. And then you would only have the one column. So you can't splinter the vote because there aren't multiple columns, and you have an agreement for how to order that ballot, which isn't just, deals behind closed doors, but it's actually the vote of the membership, which I think it may not happen. You may be right. Maybe this is too much kumbaya. Probably can't happen, but it's the least impossible, I think.
Look, I agree with you. It's the least impossible. I just, we're end of February now. Election will be most likely called to go for April 12th, in my opinion. So you're on a limited time frame there. And, One Nation are a good party. Libertarians are a good party. There's a couple of other minor right parties that are pretty good, but there's also some parties there that just seem, in my opinion, they're fucking spastics, and they can't organize a route in a brothel, let alone fucking sort this out. So I agree, it should be done. I fully support it, but it's kind of like debating a fucking schizophrenic on crack. Like, at a certain point, it will become a waste of time. So you just need to pick who are the ones that we're going to work with on this, and then who are the schizophrenics on crack that we're going to just fucking ignore. And I'm not going to, dive into that now, but I do hope if there's anyone watching that's sort of, potentially going to make those decisions, then yeah, you need to just figure out who are the good ones and who are the schizos on crack.
Well, that should be its own category then. You don't want to say who those schizos on crack are right now, live?
Not right now. I've got to collect my thoughts around that. Because there's 2 kinds of crack schizos. There's the schizos on crack that are just genuinely on crack, and then there's like the containment schizos that are pretending to be on crack.
Pretending they're on crack. All right.
That's right. They're just containment for the right, and their job is to help the coalition get across the line in the lower house, which they will do. They will drive preferences back to the coalition in the lower house, and they'll help the coalition form government. But they will fracture the Senate if what they're planning works. And by fracturing the Senate, what it will mean is Queensland, for instance, you might not get a Libertarian or a Malcolm Roberts or one of the good guys. They might miss out on the last spot, and then you'll get some insane fucking leftists taking the last spot. So you'll have a coalition lower house, and even if Dutton, forms government, becomes prime minister, and then just pulls off the mask and is like, I'm the most fucking based man that's ever existed, he then has to pass legislation through a completely cucked Senate that has been delivered to him by the fake schizo crackheads that I'm referring to. So it's a totally separate round. I haven't collected my thoughts on it yet, but I will, and I'll put it out there. But that's my concern.
Yeah. No, it can be like herding cats sometimes. I'll just put out there, if there becomes a precedent of actually having conventions where all of the members get a vote, I think the parties over time that choose not to get involved will be opting out of relevance, because I think the members will start to quite enjoy the fact that they can have a say, they can have a vote, they can go along to a convention. That'll become the game that you have to be in. Get into that game, win that game, be on the top of a ticket, then win the election will become the realistic pathway into the Senate for the minor right parties, if the precedent can be set. And it may be too late in the day for this year, but it's certainly an idea that has got people talking today and hopefully spark some conversation. But one of the things you said there segues very nicely to another dot point I had in front of me, which was, yes, absolutely. As soon as I hear that, I think the Senate. Yeah. All right,
yeah.
So you're making the point that the Liberal Party, the coalition, often, somewhat understandably, they focus on the lower house so they can win. They get to sit in nicer chairs. They get to sit in fancier offices. They get a pay bump. They get really fancy titles.
And the guys in the lower house, HQ, their entire job is to get into government. They don't give a fuck what happens in the Senate.
Yeah, which means they're focused on winning power. But of course, if you're ever interested, which we are, the Australian Taxpayers Alliance is not here to help someone get power. We're here to change policy. If you're interested in changing policy, you need to actually pass it through the Senate. And at the moment, the Greens effectively have balance of power, and the Liberals have a strategy to address this, and that is they put their head in the sand and they hum. And it's not going to be a very effective strategy, in my opinion. And there's very little talk of the Senate outcomes, right? It's all of the on TV, the talking heads, Dutton, elbow, Dutton. But I think some of the most interesting machinations happen in the Senate, and very few people watch it. So I thought, well, we could fill that gap, right? So I don't know. You were talking before about the possibility in Queensland, which is an interesting one. One Nation currently holds that spot. Now that Gerard Rennick is going to be running for it as well. And now what you call containment Clive, the trumpets presumably will put up somebody with a bit of money behind them. The Libertarians have Jim Wilmot has been running a good grassroots campaign. So there's quite a few out there, and there's a chance they might all splinter and end up with none of them.
Yeah, and this is the problem, right? Is that you've listed four different parties. You have three good people. I don't know who the trumpet person will be. So you've got Malcolm, solid guy. You've got Libertarian. Was it Jim Wilmot?
Yeah,
solid
Jim.
Guy, and then Rennick, who's just fucking based as can be. So they're all competing for that last spot. You then get the trumpets inserting themselves into this, and it will. My concern is that none of them will get up. And what will happen is you'll get a Green that takes that last spot, so you increase the Greens' representation in the Senate. Or worse, you'll get someone who's just fucking completely nuts from like some weird left-wing party. Because this is the other thing, is that the minor party vote is growing in Australia, but it's not just growing on the right, it's growing on the left as well.
Well, I've got some bad news for you across the board there. Firstly, the opinion polls at the moment suggest that their minor party vote is roughly constant to the last election. So that's a bit depressing. The polls show a couple of points up for Liberals, a couple down for Labor.
Wasn't a reform government, right? Like, and now they're starting to figure out that, oh shit, actually, people might vote.
Yeah, I'm going on the latest polls, but anyway, polls can always be wrong, but it's they're also not a place we look for too much. In terms of the Greens, some more bad news for you. They've almost certainly got the spot already. So they're now, with the voting laws that the Greens and Malcolm Turnbull, but I repeat myself, introduced about a decade ago, the Greens are pretty much guaranteed the last Senate spot in each Senate election, which means 6 every election. And of course, the Senate is elected half at a time. So if you get 6 each election, you end up with 12 senators. The Greens have 12. Oh, they have 11 plus Lydia Thorpe, who quit. She was elected as a Green. Next time she's up for election, that spot will go back to the Greens. So the Greens, unfortunately, the left basically has this lock on 12 senators. Now, the right has not worked out a way to get their, one person elected each time. And as we talked before, part of the problem is the splintering of the vote. And if they could come together, and if there's always this race to form which party is going to be the Greens of the right, if someone can do that, then hopefully they can pick up the extra seats. But in the Queensland race, interestingly, 2 Liberals are guaranteed, 1 Labor's guaranteed, and 1 Greens is probably guaranteed. So those 4 spots are done. And then there's going to be almost certainly 2 out of 3, 2 of the following people elected: the 3rd Liberal, 2nd Labor, One Nation, and perhaps a dark horse like the Libertarian or Gerard Rennick trying to compete to displace the One Nation. But I suspect it's going to be Malcolm Roberts, the 3rd Liberal, or the 2nd Labor. The best case scenario is you get 3 Liberals, 1 Labor, 1 Green, and One Nation, which would mean 4 right-wingers versus 2 left-wingers out of the 6. What are those balloons going up for? Did you see that?
It's celebrating the idea.
What got mad? What makes that happen?
It's the Rothschilds. Do balloons do it?
So 6 people elected. Normally it's split 3 left, 3 right. Normally like 3 Liberal, 2 Labor, 1 Green. So it's 3 left, 3 right. And if you ever want to pass legislation, at some stage in some state, you're going to need to get 4 that would vote for you. So, and that's very hard to see how the Liberals are going to do that, except for potentially Queensland, if they can get One Nation or Gerard Rennick over the line instead of the 2nd Labor. But the problem with, if you look back at the last election 3 years ago, One Nation scraped in that last spot. Pauline Hanson only just beat out Amanda Stoker. So unfortunately, the Liberals put up their best person in their 3rd spot because, of course, they do, because they're the Liberals. But Pauline Hanson beat out Amanda Stoker only just. In this election, most people think there's going to be a swing to the Liberals. So if there's a 1 or 2% swing to the Liberals, then the 3rd Liberal is likely to then beat the One Nation person. That's the bad news. The potential good news is then there's a chance that the One Nation person would beat the Labor person and knock out the 2nd Labor. But anyway, it's an interesting mess, and there is a worst case scenario that we just end up with nobody from the minor right in Queensland.
That's my concern. But we can talk about the other states as well. I'm not sure how it'll play out, but my concern is that this sort of trumpet setup is obviously designed to get the coalition into the lower house, which fine, good, whatever, fine. We talk about the Uniparty. Sure, even if the Liberal Party are 0.25% to the right of the Labor Party, then they should be in government, in my opinion. Because so long as we are directionally on the way towards the right. Albeit, I would argue that the Liberal Party under Malcolm Turnbull was probably further left than the current Albanese government, but that's a separate rant. But as you highlighted, my focus is on actually affecting policy and changing outcomes in this country. And the most effective way to do that is to do that through the Senate, because the Senate is extremely powerful and the structure of the Senate is really important. And I get that the lower house guys don't give a shit about that because they just want to get into government. And I get that the campaign guys don't care because they just want to look like they ran a good campaign. But they will hand a poison chalice to the coalition if the coalition forms government and we don't get a proper Senate set up. Look, maybe in the grand scheme of things, like this is just focusing on one election, maybe that's good for the minor party right in the long run, right? If you get a Dutton coalition government in, but they're completely fucking neutered by a federal Senate that hates them, and not to mention half the people in their own fucking party that hate them, then you'll have an ineffective government that probably gets turfed out in 3 years, and then there's an opening for a proper resurgent right. But that's pie in the sky stuff.
I was saying the exact same thing in a conversation earlier today with some other politics friends. So Dutton would clearly be better than Albanese. I think that's quite an easy sentence to say. But almost certainly the Dutton government, if it comes in, and I think it will, if it comes in, it's going to be a disappointment. And that's not even a riff on Dutton. I have no idea if Dutton's instincts are actually good or not, because politicians in the sort of cucked Australia are very good at hiding their good instincts.
Yeah, I know that at a personal level that Dutton is quite fucking solid and based, but the problem is that he's in a party where he's surrounded by people who are spineless worms.
Two problems. One is his party he has to bring it with him, and even if Dutton is good, that doesn't necessarily mean all the decision makers and the Liberals are. But secondly, more than that, even if Dutton ran the floor and everyone in the Liberal Party was like Dutton, as we discussed before, they don't have the Senate. They can talk smack. They can't get anything done without the Senate, and they're going to have to get either the agreement of Labor or the Greens to pass anything. And so they will be able to pass some things. Every dumb idea they have, either Labor or the Greens will agree with. You can almost guarantee that any
support, it will be a terrible policy. That you can just guarantee that if everyone supports the policy, it's because the policy is fucking awful, right? Like, anyway,
it's a depressing thought, but I mean, it's the long and the short of that is the Dutton government, even if he's a solid man individually, is probably going to be a disappointment. And when it's a disappointment, perhaps especially looking around the world and seeing all the other movements, that's going to create extra impetus for people to say, wait a second, there must be something better. Every other country in the world can work out an alternative. There must be something better than this. And hopefully it will start triggering. But like you say, it's a bit pie in the sky. We're talking 3 years in the future.
It is pie in the sky. But I think it tracks back to what we were sort of talking about before, which is the sort of giga party idea and all that kind of stuff, which is, I think it's too little too late for this election, but we shouldn't be focusing on just one election. These things take many years. A more realistic time frame to me is the next election or the one after that. And I think
the next election, I think, will be peak, because if Dutton wins this and is disappointing for 3 years, that's exactly the time people will be.
No, I agree with you. I'm just, these things take time, and I think if Dutton forms government and the Senate sucks, then we know that is the perfect opportunity to put in the groundwork and actually set up a proper right-wing resurgence in this country. And now, they've passed legislation to try and stop that via the hate speech legislation, which isn't about fucking stopping hate speech. It's about containment.
And the funding laws as well, to try and make sure that no one can ever come in and compete against the majors next time. But it's all dodgy stuff. But this segues nicely to, we've been talking some strategy and some political wackery up until now. But you mentioned actually a policy point that's worthwhile sinking our teeth into for a little bit. And that is this free speech stuff. So, I mean, like one thing that we've seen Liberal and Labor holding hands in around the country, federally in all the states, is they've both decided there's a bunch of anti-speech legislation that suddenly desperately needs to be passed. Apparently, the two main parties, through all of their wisdom, got together and they worked out that anti-Semitism was caused by too much free speech, And if we could just get rid of that nasty free speech, then of course they would solve anti-Semitism. So now we've got this spate of legislation showing up everywhere, and you've been watching it quite closely as well. I believe you were on the ground, walking the corridors at some stage, trying to shake some sense to the politicians. But
I was trying,
what's your
yeah.
take on this free speech conundrum we're facing now?
Well, so first, I think the first thing that we need to get out to just completely debunk is the idea that this legislation was about stopping hate. It just wasn't. All of the things that we've seen happening out in the community from the fringes of society are already very illegal, and you literally just need police who are willing to do their jobs and judges who are not progressives to fucking put people in prison for doing the wrong thing when it comes to these extreme acts. So we already have more than enough laws to cover that. This hate speech legislation, or the hate crimes bill to be specific, was so deliberately flawed and so broad and really lowered the thresholds for what would be considered hate speech or hateful content, that the only interpretation I can make is that this is about containing any kind of conversations that are out there that sort of question mainstream narratives. It lowered the threshold to the point where you don't even have to intend to cause harm with the speech that you're using. I don't know how words cause harm, but that's a separate discussion. Let's just play devil's advocate and assume that words hurt people. You don't even have to intend to cause harm. If your commentary is viewed as reckless, then that's enough to potentially convict you for hate speech. If your commentary is perceived to be unfairly attacking, say protected groups, that would be considered hate speech. So, for instance, maybe you don't support unfettered migration to the country, and you think.
So I have to stop you there, Brian. I'm sorry. That's hate speech. I just heard. We're gonna have to pick you up there. That's 2 years in jail.
Well,
You will not
no, it's
question
up
our
to 7 years
immigration
in jail.
policy.
It's up to 7 years in jail.
2 years in New South Wales. So I've been following the New South Wales legislation.
Oh, right.
Which
Okay. Well, yeah, this is
was worse than
So
the federal one, but
yeah, so maybe you think that completely open borders is something that should be opposed, and you start campaigning on that, and you've got an organisation like there's Migration Watch on Twitter, which is quite popular. Well, right now the bulk of migrants are coming from India and Southeast Asia. Well, what's to stop an Indian activist organisation or Southeast Asian activist organisation saying we feel oppressed by this and that these comments are hateful, and then trying to prosecute you for spreading hate? And the thing is, because the threshold is now lower, they can just convict you on being reckless with your words or your commentary. And what people don't understand is that a lot of the judges that will be overseeing this are quite progressive in their views and not impartial in how they pass down judgment. So I've seen Topher did this actually, and I respectfully disagree with him on this. I've seen an sort of accelerationist viewpoint, which is, okay, well, if we have this hate speech legislation, let's use it to our advantage to go against like Marxists who say that white people are evil or something like that. That only works if you have an impartial judiciary, and we don't. So the accelerationist perspective around this will not work. The only option is to completely repeal the bill, which kind of leans into what I've been trying to do and what our organisation is trying to do, which is push MPs to support a method to get rid of it if we have the numbers.
Well, I had other things I was going to talk about, but you've segued into that campaign that the Australian Taxpayers Alliance is running now. So no, that's a good idea. We'll segue into that. I'll see if I can remember what I was going to say later. But can you tell us more about this, this freedom pledge that you've been getting people to sign? What is it about? What does it say? Where can people find more? And who has signed it so far?
Yeah, so the Freedom Pledge is something that we came up with, which is it's really simple. It's just it's a binding pledge that we're asking federal MPs and candidates to sign, which if they sign it, they pledge that if elected, they'll never vote for us or support any form of digital ID in any way. They will vote to repeal the hate crimes bill, and they will commit to trying to enshrine free speech in the Australian Constitution. So it's got 3 simple asks. They're all sort of tied to each other when it comes to opposing moves by establishment governments to control what you can and can't say and how you can and can't say these words. And we're starting to get some buy-in. So the first person to sign it was Jordan Ditloff. He's the lead Senate candidate for the Libertarians down in Victoria. Props to Jordan if you're watching. Off the back of that, Senator Malcolm Roberts has signed it. A couple of Libertarian candidates in New South Wales have signed it as well for lower house seats. So Connie Harvey for, I think it's Macarthur, she signed it. And then my understanding is there's a couple of other candidates who are running as lead Senate candidates who are going to sign it as well. And I'm hoping Jared Rennick and some others sign it as well, which we're working on. But, we've got time to play with this up until the election, and there's a lot of competing priorities. But it's slowly picking up steam, and it's good to see. And the entire thought process behind it is that, as I said, I disagree with the accelerationist view on this bill. You will not be able to use it to your own advantages because it will be seen by judges, and the judges are not impartial. So the only way to get rid of this is to kill it and to remove the bill if you have the numbers.
Yeah, so for people listening along at home, that's the link below. Just write that down. You can't cut and paste it off the screen right now, but it's not that hard to remember, taxpayers.org.au/freedom, and send it to your local candidates. If there's candidates you support out there, you want to make sure they are locked in on a free speech agenda. Let's get them all to sign this so that no matter which minor right candidate is elected, we know we've got a person solid on free speech. And push your major party candidates. I suspect you'll struggle to get them to agree. I suspect some of them would like to agree, but probably aren't allowed to. At least put it in front of them. So please, if you're watching this right now, take that link, send it to Ralph Babette, Pauline Hanson, Jared Rennick, all of the minor parties, Family First, whichever ones I'm forgetting right now. So make sure that as many as possible.
And you should send it to your major party local MP as well. They need to understand that there is actually a pressure around this from the right. You need to create that space to allow, because there are some solid people that are still within the major parties that would like to do things, but they just feel like they haven't got the momentum on their side to try and push it. Well, you need to create that momentum, right? And you need to create, I had to use a leftist term, you need to create that safe space for some of these politicians within the cuck parties to then walk into and adopt your policies. So I can't believe I'm using that. I'm going to get accused of being woke right, but we need to create a safe space for the right to actually take a strong stand when it comes to protecting free speech and getting rid of this bill. And I have to repeat it. This bill is not about stopping hate. It is not about stopping anti-Semitism or any of the other things that it's allegedly there to prevent. It is a bill that has the express purpose of containing anyone out on the fringes that wants to criticize the sort of death spiral that this establishment government is creating for this country.
Look, instead of safe space, I can help you out with a way to frame that's a little bit less fake and gay. It's expanding the Overton window, making it easier for people to pick a position just behind if we can push that Overton window a bit further out, it makes it easier for everyone to fall in behind that. So that's, I think, a worthwhile thing to do.
I really want someone to pick up on us saying safe space, though, and then call us woke right. It'll be just...
Well, especially since I followed up with calling that fake and gay. So yeah, it's got to be. Yes. We're all in trouble today. We're all in trouble. What's this latest comment? If you had a decaf soy latte today, okay.
You are woke.
Well, I'm safe. I didn't have that. I've got to have my caffeine. I'm going to half disagree with you on a point. Now, I think the agenda here is basically to shut down the parameters of debate, to force people to fit into the preferred agenda of our bureaucratic media academic elite. But I don't think that's the motivation behind the politicians. I think politicians often just get led around by the nose.
You think that? Oh, okay. No, sorry. I understand what you're saying.
I agree. The people pushing the legislation in the background
read the bill and probably just backed it because of a fervor that was out there. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I think the politicians fall for this problem. It's the Monty Python. Something must be done. This is something. Therefore, this must be done. They just feel so quickly. I need to look busy. I need to do something. Give me a piece of legislation. I'll sign it. I don't care what's in it. I don't care if it works. I just need to sign something so that the voters can see how busy I am.
John McGowan talks about how most politicians are retarded, and if you just assume that they're retarded, then the positions that they fall into make sense. But the other thing that he talks about, which I personally love, is what he refers to as the dark retard, which is the one that's not a politician, but they're sort of in the decision-making centers of the parties, and they are led around by the nose, as you say, and they're just as retarded as a politician, but they see themselves as being like this galaxy brain, political operative. Hence, they're the dark retard. And I think you're right when I say that this bill is about containment. I don't think that every single MP and senator that voted for it was sitting there going, "Ha, we're going to contain a resurgent right." I think a lot of them are genuinely concerned about what they're seeing out in the fringes of the community, and they just fucking put a rubber stamp on it without even reading the bill. I think it was Bridget McKenzie being questioned about it on Sky News with James Morrow and Rita Panahi and Rowan, and it sounded like she didn't even read the legislation.
So she had no idea that there was going to be any pushback. She just assumed that everyone on the right must agree with anti-free speech laws now suddenly, which is, does she remember 18C? I mean, we had a whole debate about that a while ago.
Oh, don't get me started on that. No, I would say that most of them completely forgot about that issue. But the way that she was responding to the questions, and I'll try and find the clip and repost it on our X account later this evening. But it seemed like she didn't read it. So I think you're broadly right, which is most of these people just blindly backed it because they want to be seen to be doing something, taking a strong stance and all that kind of stuff. But there is that little group of dark retards who does push this along, and they're pushed along by God knows what.
Yeah, they're probably the bureaucratic media elite. They're the people I blame for most of the problems of this world, and the spineless politicians who are too gutless to stand up to them. But I mentioned this before as an off-the-cuff comment, but it's a quick one-liner that seems to me hard to respond. So I don't know if you can play devil's advocate. How do you respond to that? If there's a rise in hate, if it exists, if the rise in hate isn't caused by free speech, then getting rid of free speech isn't going to fix hate. Does anyone honestly think that anti-Semitism is caused by free speach? I mean, that seems like a really direct question that they then would have to either say, yes, I think free speech causes anti-Semitism, that's why I'm blocking it, or no, look, it's not caused by free speech, to which we say, well, then why are you winding back free speech? It seems like a foolproof argument.
I think that there are some people out there that are stupid enough to think that free speech is what causes anti-Semitism. Genuinely, I'm pretty sure I saw some CNN journalists basically asking Marco Rubio.
Yeah, they said that the rise of the Nazis was that the Nazis were caused by free speech or something like that.
That's what caused it. It wasn't like the degradation of Weimar Germany or anything. No. It was that people could say words. Like, to get into the guts of this, I guess the question I would ask is also, like, where does the harm come from words? Like, I get it. There's people with very hate-filled views, and I disagree with them, right? But they're words. I don't understand what the. I sound like a boomer here, but I still remember the saying "sticks and stones," right? Like,
well, I'll play the woke role now. I'll play devil's advocate. Look, I mean, the harm obviously isn't physical harm, and I really think it's only the government's role to protect us from physical harm. But I mean, I think people can say things to you that get to you. I think we've all probably experienced it.
Agreed.
And that's probably what they're talking about: the emotional harm, the sadness harm. That is a type of harm. I mean, some people on our side go down the argument of saying that isn't real harm, therefore you shouldn't do anything about it. I take a different approach. I say that is real harm, but it's not physical harm. It's emotional harm. That's a part of something that happens if you live as an adult in life. You can't have the government protect you from emotional harm without giving them so much power that it is ungodly and too dangerous to even consider. So I accept that there's emotional harm you can get from words, but that's kind of like what it's like to be an adult, or even to be a kid. Realistically, kids are cruel. I mean, all kids are going to suffer emotional harm at some stage as well. And to become a resilient person, you don't want to escape all indications of ever having emotional harm. You want to become a person who can experience negative words, know how to deal with them, know how to move on, and not have it derail your whole existence. And this is probably the issue of we've mollycoddled this. The Coddling of the American Mind is a great book by Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff. If you haven't read it at home, if you run across it, pick it up, buy it. It's great. It makes the case that the way we're bringing up kids today in this mollycoddled environment, telling them if you ever have an emotional harm, go to an authority figure and they will ban the person. These people have gone through school like that, gone through uni like that, now entered the HR departments of all our big companies, and they've still got the attitude that if someone hurts your fifis, you run to an authority figure and they smack the person on the hand. And this makes people unresilient. Right? I mean, it makes people
Yeah.
unable to cope with the real world.
It does for like certain generations, but what I'm seeing with the younger guys and girls is that they're becoming more extremist as a result. And I don't mean extreme right, but like extreme left as well. They like when you talk to a Zoomer about their like political views, and I'm talking, like an 18, 19 sort of year old kid who they're at that age where they're just starting to want to talk about political issues. They haven't joined a party. They're not at that stage yet, but they're just, they're getting on social media and talking about their views. It's like hardcore left or hardcore right. There's not a lot in the middle, and a lot of it, I mean, I know with the hardcore right younger guys, is because they see this kind of like Karen industrial complex, which has been set up to make sure that millennials and Gen Xers and stuff don't get their feelings hurt.
Did you just
And
coin that term, the Karen industrial complex? Because that's great.
I've been pushing that for about 2 years now, since the last election, right? Like once the Teals got elected, I was like, that's just the Karen industrial complex, right? It's like them and then health bureaucrats. And they're just like, they're the same kind of worldview, which is that like, how do I make everything fake and gay and awful to suit my like fake gay life? And that's what they do. Anyway, we're going on a separate rant about the Karen industrial complex, but younger people are seeing this and they don't like it. Even the young like left wing Zoomers, their entire like economic approach is left wing, but they're like sort of when it comes to hurt feelings and stuff, they would be considered hard right because they don't care about that stuff. They will.
Well, yes, the pushback seems to be coming. Look, just exactly echoing the points you made there. And we talked a bit before about the German election and how the AfD, their populist right party, just is now the second biggest party in the country. If you look at the people under 25 in Germany, the two biggest parties are Die Linke, which is the left, which is basically the leftover of their communist party. It is the most hard left party that gets people elected in Germany, basically communists or pseudo-communists, and AfD. So
Yes.
the communists and the AfD were the two biggest parties. They were the only parties with over 20% support from people under 25. Both of them well and truly eclipsing the nominal centre-left and centre-right parties that are supposed to be what polite people vote for. So that exactly makes your point.
Those younger people will be in their early to mid-20s and actually way more politically engaged and way more politically involved. And they will... they will start really representing a huge portion of the votes. So there is this rise of, I don't want to fall into the trap of saying there's a rise of extremism. I'm saying there's a rise of sort of non-normie viewpoints around a whole raft of things. And part of that is being driven by the Karen industrial complex that just wants to just have these like ham-fisted slam down things of like, oh well, cigarettes are bad, therefore we're going to make them cost $1 million, and oh shit, now there's 100 or 200 fire bombings in Victoria and people shot dead in the streets and an innocent lady got fucking burned alive, right? Like, so then what do they do after that? Well, there's words online that we don't like, so we're going to pass legislation to stop that. And the sun is different, so we're going to put solar panels everywhere. Or the wind, we love the wind now. So like it's this like ham-fisted, I want to rip my hair out. Like, it's just.
Didn't you know that
complex, and
praying to Ra is the praying to Ra is the modern version?
They sit there and they're shocked and reach for the smelling salts when younger Australians and younger generations around the world are going, "Fuck you! I don't want whatever you're trying to say."
My take on that. You say you don't want to say there's growing extremism. I think what there is a growing shift towards populism, and I'll be very careful how I describe that, because I used to hate the term because I didn't really know what it meant, because what politician doesn't like to be popular. But I think there is a very useful use for the term, and that's basically someone who has lost all faith in the current elites.
That's right.
Now, you can't have a world without elites because you replace the current elites, someone else is going to come in, someone is going to have to coordinate something. You're going to have some sort of Elon Musk if you want anyone to get to Mars. I mean, you're going to but we used to have a lot more faith in roughly the competence. They might not be great people, but we had faith in the competence of the people running the institutions, our academic elite, our media elite. We used to roughly trust the media, roughly trust the academy, roughly trust the bureaucrats to be trying to just do honestly their best version of giving advice to government. And I think populism is this growing distrust. And you can get that in lots of different shades. So we're seeing a rising left populism. We're seeing rising sort of nationalist, fascist populism. And there's also rising around the world libertarian populism. And obviously, I hope that the libertarian populism is the one that wins out. I think it's unavoidable that the rise of populism, the current elites in our system have justifiably now don't have the faith of the people. They have taken us in a direction that is not the direction that is sustainable. It is taking us off a cliff. We can't keep going down this path. And now people are searching around for what's the alternative. I think a majority has realized we're on the wrong trajectory. We haven't yet got a majority agreeing what is the new trajectory. And that's why we're seeing this bitter fight between this radical left, radical right, quirky libertarians, and everyone else trying to work out the best version of populism.
The most hilarious thing about it as well is watching watching these sort of establishment centrists realize that something's wrong, but because, as John McGowan likes to point out, they're retarded and they're led by dark retards, they can't actually pinpoint what's wrong. So then they announce policies that no one cares about anymore, right? Like you've got the Labor Party going out there saying, well, Medicare's free now. Right? You can go see GPs for free. We're amazing, vote for us. No one cares. The voters that care about that are already voting for you. So the ones that you need to pick up to form government do not give a shit about such a like normie coded policy. Like they just, and it's hilarious. Like I see it in some of these.
Look, I hope you're right, but I don't actually see evidence in the polls that people are shifting to the populist parties in Australia yet. The Greens aren't going up
behind it, and I would say that they don't answer those polls. But
perhaps I think it's Australians who are lagging behind. I mean, I just think we're not having the moment that the rest of the world is having yet. I think we're like either compulsory voting or something in our culture means we get it late, and then perhaps we get it these movements less strongly. I hope something shifts, but I think it may be just Australia hasn't shifted as much yet. And I noticed there was one group of people that immediately thought that Labor's Medicare announcement was very important and dived into the conversation. And that was, of course, the Liberals, who immediately joined the bidding war on who can promise to spend more money on tweaking Medicare. I believe they outbid them. So Labor said 8.5 billion extra, and the Liberals, I guess the Brains Trust went 8.5. I can beat that 9. Yeah. 9, that's my bid. Can I hear a 9.5? Can I hear a 9.5 going? It's
I'm waiting for a mainstream journalist to realize this, but what's quite interesting is that the Liberals this time around with their alternative budget, they actually have more money to play with than Labor because they've committed to legalizing vapes, which would generate about $3 to $5 billion in revenue. So they've got an extra $3 to $5 billion within their potential budgets to throw out there to try and pick up votes, because from the simple fact that they have said that if they're elected, they'll legalize vaping in the country, which is a good thing. So
absolutely.
They're probably
and we should.
Okay, well, this is $8.5 billion. We'll just whack a little bit more. We'll take it out of this budget and we'll shift things around. They've got more fat to trim, effectively, or more to play with.
Well, you know what? You mentioning that means
the budget's going down. They have more stuff to hand out.
We should use that opportunity to plug once against the ATA. We've been running a campaign to try and encourage the parties to legalize vaping for quite a long time now. Trying to have those conversations, get in the public eye and shift the needle. Hopefully we have shifted the needle. If you like what we've done on that front in this discussion, on the free speech space, on tax, which we'll discuss more maybe shortly or in the coming weeks, taxpayers.org.au, please consider becoming a member. If you've got lots of money, feel free to join one of those fancy tiers. But realistically, for the average punter, we've got a cheap option, a couple of dollars a month. It just helps things to tick over here so we can keep doing what we're doing. Please consider going over there and having a look. Look, we're coming up close to the hour mark. So I think an hour is a good amount of time to make sure we don't bore people. But one last thing there, because you did mention the Liberals might have a bit more money to play with because they have taken the correct stance of looking to legalize vaping. You'd hope one thing they would do there is announce an impressive tax cutting package. But I got to say, it's for a party that's supposed to be known for being the tax cutting party, or at least the lower tax party, they've been remarkably silent on this, except for a couple of little tweaks that no one really understands or cares about. One of those, by the way, is a very good tweak. That's accelerated depreciation is a good idea. But again, most people don't really pay close attention to that sort of nuance. So I've been waiting, hoping that they've just slow played it and they've got a better idea up their sleeve of a big tax cut.
Yeah, I have.
But it seems missing in action.
But I haven't seen anything. I would have thought by now it would be announced. And I just, I sent you that Orban policy, which I just think is awesome. Now, I think the policy is basically once you have two children, I think the mother can completely avoid income taxes entirely, pay zero income tax. I think you were saying that should be expanded out to either parent, which I agree with. There needs to be tax benefits or tax cuts for families in this country, massive tax cuts. And given the coalition have an extra few $1 billion if they legalize vapes, that's enough to fund a few tax cuts that would actually help families in this country. So
yeah, you would hope so. I mean, you'd hope they'd be willing to even cut taxes by
the opportunity.
You'd hope they'd be willing to cut taxes by more than the amount they raised in vape revenue, because
currently
the tax take is just far too high in Australia, and it's higher than it has been. It's higher than the long-term average. It's higher than what they said they would go for. So you'd think tax cuts would be on the agenda. Family tax cuts is a very obvious place, especially if, and maybe next week or sometime soon, we can dive into the issue of sort of the plummeting fertility rates and how no one's having kids, and how if the human species was another animal, we'd be currently listed as endangered on our current trajectory, which is a big topic, and ones who have listened to me rant before know that I enjoy getting into the weeds on that topic. But yeah, family tax cuts should be in there. To push back the comment I gave you on X where you posted this, this is to make it so that women now don't have to pay any income tax after they've had two kids. Great as far as it goes. I mean, my pushback there is that's only for the women.
I think
and what that does is it creates... Now, I am, for people who don't know me, when I'm about to say this, you're going to pigeonhole me as some sort of crusty conservative. I am quite the radical libertarian in my politics. I don't want the government getting involved in nearly anything, perhaps anything. So I'm not saying that the government should be trying to create what I'm about to say, but I am in my old age a bit of a convert to the idea. I am about to commit hate speech. Say it's not a terrible thing to allow some people to live on a single income. And in some situations, I mean, my wife enjoys, when she can, spending time at home with the kids. That's the way we enjoy to set up our life. Creating a set of incentives through the tax system to say that the women are specially advantaged if they are funneled into work. Get away. Don't raise your own kids. No. Send your kids off to someone else who will raise your kids as a job. Make sure you don't raise your kids. And we'll funnel you into the factory where you can work for Mr. McGillicuddy making some more widgets. Look, that's for some people, and that's great. And I don't want the government to ban it or tax it out of existence. I'm just saying a policy that explicitly incentivizes sending the women back to work quicker than the men. I like tax cuts, but I wish there was a way we could do that where we just cut taxes on the family instead of specifically cutting tax on the mother.
I agree with expanding it out. But I put a post up on X earlier today saying that I haven't seen a single political party advocate for this. No, it just doesn't seem to be there. I'm sure.
Well, in their defense, I can think of two minor parties. I mean, it's hard to get people to pay attention to the tax policies of minor parties because there's the minor party culture war shit fights going on. But in their defense, I believe both the Libertarians and One Nation have put out for a policy for family income splitting, which is effectively to say that it's effectively a tax cut for families. It allows people with a stay-at-home parent to be able to get the same benefit of basically getting two tax-free thresholds. If you have two working parents, both are able to take advantage of the tax-free threshold. If you've got one working parent and one stay-at-home, that family only gets one tax-free threshold. The idea is, at least to some degree, allow that family to get the advantage of two tax-free thresholds so that they're paying a little less tax as a family unit with one stay-at-home parent. And it's an idea that's floated around quite a while. This is called income splitting, or in America, they call it joint filing of your tax returns, taxing the family unit instead of the individual. And it allows slightly lighter tax on families that don't have just two work slaves full-time at Mr. McGillicuddy's factory. So they've both released that policy. I think it's a good policy. Matt Canavan, to his credit, a National Party senator in the LNP, he's pushed this idea before. So it has been floating out there, and it would do some good on this front. Unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be much pickup from the major parties yet, but I mean, we're going to join that debate very soon. As Brian knows, we're going to be joining that discussion in a paper coming out later this week, and we'll be back to talk to you about that in the very near future.
Yeah, before we go, I mean, there's a weird opposition in some of members of the opposition to touch this stuff, and I don't know where it comes from. Maybe they just think that it'll cost a lot of money, but that argument doesn't stack up because they're willing to piss our money up against the wall and all kinds of stupid stuff. So
well, they don't want to be called sexist, because I was very careful. I worded that one stay-at-home parent, but everyone kind of knows when a mother has a kid, they're more likely to want to stay home a bit more than the dad will.
well, that's the natural order of things. That's the way it should be.
I agree. I've got no complaint with that. But once people notice that, then there's the accusation that, oh, if you don't want both parents working full-time and send the kids off to be raised in a factory, then you're against women. And the Liberal Party, of course, trip over themselves sideways to desperately say, no, we're not against women. We want... We love women so much. We want to make sure they spend no time with their kids and they work 60 hours on some job they hate, because that's what you do if you love women. And the Liberals seem to genuinely believe that. I say it satirically, but they seem to genuinely believe it. And so they're scared shitless of being called sexist. And that's why they run away from the policy, I think.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think you're right.
Very, very depressing. I hope we didn't leave everyone on too much of a black pill there, but that's...
No, so I think again, I won't say create the safe space for the right. We will push the Overton window, and I think that we can push the Overton window on this as well, and create the momentum that these coalition MPs, the ones that we know are still pretty solid, might actually pick up and run with it.
Touch wood, touch wood. Well, all we can do is, like I think I was saying on the live stream I was doing earlier this week, is we should be cautious and worried, but don't get too depressed, because getting too depressed about getting too black pill just makes you disengage, and also life could still be good. Brian, you've got a new young human in your house, making you all, the rest of you, seem old and ensuring you don't get too much sleep. So the rest of life can be good. So be aware, be cautious, but still have fun in the world. Everyone, not too many black pills. That brings us up to an hour. I think we've ticked all the main boxes. I think that was fun. I think we'll do it again. If you're listening at home, please, once again, taxpayers.org.au, go have a look, check out what we're doing, join if you can. Otherwise, this has been simulcast on YouTube, Facebook, and on X. Please go and find us. Find the Australian Taxpayers Alliance. Find Brian Marlow, this schmuck over here. Find myself, John Humphreys. Give us a follow on all those platforms, and we can help to get this message out more and more going forward. But for now, I think we're going to log off. We will be back doing this regularly each Monday night, the ATA Politics Chat. And I think we'll be back intermittently between that as well to talk about specific policy ideas, especially Australian Taxpayers Alliance. You'd be surprised to hear we have a few tax ideas for this election. We're going to be talking about them in the lead up to this election. So I hope you can join us for those. And until then, thank you. Thanks, Brian.
Everyone.